Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session. It's my pleasure to announce that Olu and I grew up in the same vicinity in Warri. Warri, no, they carry last. And we have followed each other. While I was studying at the University of Benin, he used to visit the studio. And while I graduated and he was still working at Auchi Poly, where my parents resided, I visited him always in the studio. So that privileged knowledge belongs to me alone. But what I know, I don't know. I want Olu to please now tell the audience who is the artist Olu, how is he coping with being an artist and the demands of being an artist. Thank you.
Sitting beside Frank, you know you must adjust to sit properly because it comes from different perspective. I think just like the last section, mod has played a lot of role in the shaping of artists. I think both of us have a lot of things in common in the sense that our art started from the street, using the broom as our scriber, and I never had a problem of choice. My parents had, pressed me on what to study. I mean, it was a free society, Warri. But when I left Warri for Auchi, I first had 2 years in banking because my uncle was the managing director of the Nigerian Bank, and it was mandatory if you don't make your first entrance to school, you spend 2 years in the bank. And that gave me a different perspective. I think I was very financially responsible because of working in the bank. But the 2 years of the bank was very rebellious for me because almost every month I had a query, and the query is for dress code because there's artists in me that wants to rebel about formality. So I was not a formal person. And so the 2 years I had 24 queries, so on the average of one in a month. So it was very liberating for me when I got to the art school. And of course, I thought I was going to be a graphic artist because that was what we have at our exposure at that point in time. But going to the graphic school, the art school, the graphics class, you're restricted, no more than one color, more than 2 letters or whatever. And I think that was not, those are the things I was escaping from in the bank. And then getting to the art school again, you go to a place where you look at the fonts, you have thousands of fonts. Why will you restrict me to just one? So if I were to really be a graphic artist, I must have the opportunity to be able to use for one letter, one font. And that's not possible. Okay, so I ended up in my sculptural class. The first assignment is to create birds with leaves. And I had my A, and I thought that was the right place to be. And that's how I got into sculpture in the first place. I don't know if...
What's the demands? We're now asking about the demands of being an artist, for one.
Well, what it demands for an artist is just to be very much true to yourself, be as dedicated as ever, and be yourself. I think that's what almost everybody who's been speaking, talking about, the self-consciousness of yourself, because art, to me, is very subjective. What I do is to look at the environment and issues, and I try to filter it through my own lens, thus making it my own reality. So the demand for art, is so much, is far, far more than the demand for being a soldier, because many times you exhibit, you think you spend months preparing for things and you exhibit, and people just come and spend only 3 minutes to look at your work. So no other profession, you put so much energy in, and people take just 2 minutes to look at it. We're lucky that artists, we're lucky that people now are getting more conscious, engaging the work itself, so the art is feeling more important. But it's an ongoing struggle. It's not an easy one, so I don't think I've even found the answer to that yet.
Well, have not found the answer. I'm going to run through a series of sculptures from Africa's ancient past to the contemporary. And we have here the Nok culture dating 500 BC, which actually is one of the oldest in Africa after the Egyptian traditions and the rock paintings in South Africa and North Africa. And then a development arising from the proportion you find here is reflected in this Ghanaian work. And then two, we have the art of the royal conventions by way of development of sculptures in Africa, Ife, Benin, manifesting as ideal sculptures or sculptures premised on idealism. Then we jump straight to the contemporary modernists, Ben Nwonwu's work in the 50s, late 50s, and then his work at the Protestant Chapel, the University of Ibadan, showing some sort of metamorphosis from strict idealism to stylizations as we can find them. And then the dancer in bronze, really fully metamorphosing into stylistic work, along with the famous drummer. And then Olu was in Dakar so many years ago. This was the first ever work that won the first prize in the Dakar Art Biennale. And we're here standing with a modernist from China, Ai Weiwei's work, shown in Munich some 2009. And then Olu, some years later, wins the Grand Prix in Dakar 2014. And I'm asking, please, we've run through quickly sculptures from some ancient or historical traditions in Africa to what we call a modern mix. Can you just give us a brief of what you think sculpture amounts to, stands for within the trajectory of history we have just given around your work?
Well, that's a very tough one, but I will attempt. Sculpture to me is exploring 3 dimensions in space, and working with steel and working with repurposed objects. One can use the objects to travel back into time and then come to the forward with technology. So technology compresses this period you're talking about, because now it is a lot easier for one to come up with things faster than before. And working with steel, it shows how our lives are all woven around, because from the furniture, everything around you has steel in it. And for artists, it's a lot easier for you to relate to that. You're not dealing with forms that are primarily traditional, thing that panels to either traditional rituals or anything. But as a modernist and an urbanist, my consistency is to look at the internet, look at what is happening in the society, the streets, and that gives me some kind of context in which I put my work. So that's where I find myself. So I'm not an art historian, and I don't pretend to be one. But I think one of the problems we have in art here is that artistry is not taught properly, and so people cannot put things in the right context. But Ben Nwonwu, to me, has done a lot, so it put us in the framework of where we could look at ancient and look at tradition because of the material that he used himself.
Well, the sunflower still here on the display won the first prize in 2014 in Dakar. Can you tell us how you felt like moving or achieving this feat within the span of time you've worked so far as a sculptor, and bringing at least a laurel to yourself and to the nation?
Well, to start with, I don't think art should be placed into any kind of contest, because almost everybody who participated in the Biennale, in their own right, they are winners. But I think with the prize, the people who follows me tend to even enjoy it more than myself, because I will tell you that that entry, that was probably my 4th application to the Dakar, and they keep turning me down. It's not that my work changes. So it wasn't really special, but I think it's sometimes nice to be recognized. That's the second prize that I won, but I think there are many more prizes out there that one is waiting to enjoy. And I think the most important prize that comes with this is not to let it get into your head, because, and that's why I'm not excited about it, because there are many more out there for one to go for. But the most interesting thing is that it compels people to look at this, and then it evolves into some series. And you have people who come and say they want the sunflower, because now, well, I think most importantly, the sunflower, I'd like to talk about sunflower in the sense that the flowers, the sunflower itself, comprises of thousands of flowers. And in this piece, what I was trying to achieve is talking about the collectiveness of the people, not just Africans. And if they come together, he blossom, so this is one of the pieces that I was more talking about the positive thing about connectivity with people, and each of these flowers connect with one of them, and that's the high point of that.
Yeah, we get back to the Auchi Polytechnic at the beginning of the beginning. While you were a student, you did this work as your final year project. I used to be with you then in the studio. I used to see you scavenge for materials, rods, tanks from water storage all over. And it does appear, it not necessarily does appear, in truth, metal is and has dominated your work. How can we talk about this work and then your foray into metal and the sustenance that has held your work in metal majorly up till now?
This work, there's a tradition in Aoshi at that time where we have a sculpture garden, and for most sculptors, you go to the garden and you say, I want to do something bigger, the biggest sculpture in the garden. So that was one of the motivating factors. And of course, Aoshi they just moved from Benin to the permanent site, so there's a whole lot of construction taking place, and typical of Nigerian contractors, there are a lot of people who abandon things on the site, and so there are a lot of roads. And so readily, these materials are around the campus. And I just go around and pick, but sometimes you break into the site, but during the day, not in the night, because you wear your overall, and they think they confuse for one of their laborers, and you pick their rows, and then once you get to the sculpture studio, you have to work fast enough to convert it into sculpture. And this piece, there's a chain there that I use as the leash for the horse itself. That used to be the security post, chain they used to prevent cars from driving through the gate. If a car is coming, they just pull it up because there's no bar, and then they lower it if you want to. So one evening, and they were becoming nuisance. So one evening I went to the site when they were changing duties, and had a brand new axle, wrapped the chain on my hand and cut it off, and then moved straight to the sculpture studio and use it as my project. Of course, somebody lost their job because of that, because the authorities said, well, if the security post is not safe, then nowhere on the campus is safe, So, but when they came, they were sure it's their chain, but then, of course, the worry mentality in me, I quickly ran to the town to get a receipt to back up my purchase. You could buy a receipt to back up your purchase, so that saved me for that. But the very tragic thing about this, if you steal to do anything, he comes back to haunt you. This was the biggest, and I think it was still the biggest in the school, but we couldn't move it from the location where it was fabricated because of the terrain. We were in the basement, and it's a very slopey place. The military came with a crane, and the crane got stuck. So it was a nightmare for everybody, but at the same time, that's when your professor comes to tell you, so, well, it's not your fault, at least you tried. So what happened is you have to cannibalize this, subsequent students, this becomes also their source of material. So, because that's the only way they could do that until after the metal was completely used. So this again informed my new work because that's how my work started to. So it was something that happened then, but it's like it continued to haunt me, and that's how my works evolved to.
So that's where metal trapped you.
Yes.
Yeah. Olu, I know you're a very good draftsman, a very strong one for that matter. And if we screen through some of your works in drawing, you will want to agree with me that the next phase of your work makes a whole lot of sense, introducing sculpture or introducing accurate and acute two-dimensionality that is orderly into the sculptural terrain or arena. These are his swift lines and drawings, and you can see how swift and strong they are. We come to a series of works he has done that appear to constitute what I call an interface between real relief sculptures to three-dimensionality and flat sculptures as such, creating some kind of silhouettes all within the framework of metals and colored grounds, as you can see, and a few of them. Can you tell us that passion of yours that we see in paper in its strength, and how invariably you translated them into what I call sculptural drawing, using what he calls plasma cutting on metal?
Well, I think it's a lot easier because drawing is mark making, and anything that can make mark, or anything that can accept mark, you can call it drawing. I never saw it as sculpture because I want to demystify the fear of sculpture to most people. A lot of people who come to the class, they think metal is tough, so they don't want to do it. They don't even want to weld. But if you have the technology and you use the same fluidity, you can do anything you want to do with it. So it was natural for that connection because at the moment I could cut with plasma cut, and I think it's more portable. And I just decided I should experiment with it, but I see it primarily as drawing, even when they are welded. It's the same nuances of drawing that I bring into it. And at this stage also, failure, errors was not part of my consciousness anymore because each line you cut, you cannot weld it back. You just go through. And then I also trying to look at how to change the format and how drawings can be as bold as, billboard, because with steel you have the grounds are bigger, you can weld and make it, and then of course they are strong enough, you don't need any frame to hold it. And that's what I was pushing. In the slide on the left there, it can collapse into two, there's an hinge there. So this also happened to be when I started traveling and then moving things, to move a sculpture of this size, you need a truck. But because they are portable, you can collapse them into folds like paper. And steel and paper, they are almost of the same. Whatever you do with paper, you can do with steel. It's just that the technology is what comes into play. And for the colors, I was using powder coating. And most of the cars, most of the things, they use powder coating to do. So it's also like looking at where my art started from, drawing on the soil, and I saw the powder as like the soil component, and I bring it in. So that's how it came about.
I so much enjoy the synergy in this work. Can you please allow us to appreciate it from your mind?
Well, this work is titled Adam and Eve, but it all started with, I think this is the second of my nail series. I teach in Yaba Tech, so we have also run a studio, and I had 2 students who had come for industrial attachment, and I didn't think teaching from Monday to Friday, I want to continue with that. So in order not to close the door, I asked them to go around the street to harvest nails. I gave them magnets, to go around. And because also I was driving an old car, and every now and then I go to the vulcanizer, and it's always about nail puncturing your tires. So I said, look, go to the streets. I want to be sure you're really hungry for this knowledge. They went, came back with just a couple of nails, and the next day I didn't see them, because that's not the idea of sculpture, But little did I know that also, was the attraction for nails. And then shortly after that, I had, an invitation to participate in the Victoria and Albert Museum, exhibition based on crafts, artists who use crafts, objects to create artwork. So the nails, by all means, it was a craft tool. So that put me into that. And then I traveled. If you traveled, the people know how to say welcome to you. And so you make your list, your want list immediately. And I realized there are no scrap yards in some places where you go to, but there are a whole lot of nails. So you can buy a box of nail and put it in your backpack and ride a bicycle and then create that. So that's how it started. But again, it's drawing, because if you look at it, I'm using the notion of the simultaneous contrast, and then, of course, this is, I'm also trying to evoke the fourth dimension, the spiritual component of the nails itself. If it's well lit, the cast shadow on the background itself creates a different aura, thus making the sculpture to come alive. These are strategies that I employed when I'm working with nails, and then I also want it to be transparent. But primarily, at this stage, what is in my mind is drawing, not even sculpture.
Well, you've drawn us into an aspect that I want to comment on again. There is this idea in historical African art where artists harvested nails, metals, and all of that, and used them on wood within what we call mixed media. With the surrealists, you found somebody like Picasso picking the head of a bicycle, the handle and the seat, and making the head of a bull. And then all of a sudden, in contemporary art, it grows very, very wide and great, to the extent, like you said, picking scraps, discards, and all of that. There is a way, I think, it relates to what we today call eco-ethics, eco-aesthetics, or environmental stewardship, in the sense that you read the environment of scraps and then convert them into pleasurable materials like we've seen here. Mm-hmm. And a whole lot of work you've done recently, and that actually dominates what we call the Olu Amoda body of work, consists of such works. How do you find yourself contributing to a clean environment as a sculptor, and then a pleasurable material coming out of what used to be discards in the environment?
Well, most people who work with these repurposed objects, environmental issues list in the cadre of things. You're attracted to the object based on the geometric shape or the form that you see in it, the value of it. But, what I did here is I had to come up with about 3 or 4 strategies. I first pretend to be a modern-day archaeologist, who had to look at objects and trying to see how much energy they have and the civilization that produced that object. So that's key to me. And then the second part of it is to ensure that I do not alter the object so much. I can cut it, but I leave a substantial part of the object that allows people to make the connection between the first use and the secondary use of it. And then lastly, is to expand the dialogue to create more materials that contemporary sculptures could be used to express itself. Now, if you put those 3 together, you find that I lost my position already as an artist because the objects now takes over, and they direct, and I all listen to that. And that strategy works a lot too, because people who also see my works make that kind of connections. And I got a lot of gifts because people call me and say, well, look, I have a box of nail, I want to try them. Or people building, invite me to the building site, or people just pick things because they are making that connection. Perhaps that is the closest we can talk about the eco, ethics, But it was not on the top of my consciousness at all. And also, people use things like found objects to describe this. The objects are not lost. They find you. You don't find them. So the artist now have to start to adjust his position. Yes, I can stand by this work, but the truth about it is that somehow when you get into the groove, you have to listen to the metals, listen to these objects, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm just a steward, So
I want to bring you back again to a particular thinking. When artists behave abnormally when they see objects, oftentimes some people think that they've lost their mind and will want to ask you, come on, what is in this thing that this man is looking at? And he tells us that the object found him and he didn't find the object. If you didn't find the object, how come it answered certain questions regarding form which you put them to?
Well, you will always, agree that it is difficult to finish an artwork. And oftentimes something happens to you and you not feel the work is completed. I think that is the power of where the object comes into you and says, I want to be part of that. But, the object speaks a lot, because they define us, the social ladder, and when you look at certain objects like cars, it defines the people. Look at your phone. Look at all these are objects that defines people. So it's not the people. You see the object and use it to embellish and then to add to your own status. And in that same vein, that is how object comes into the arts too. Don't forget that any object you pick, there are so many people that will have come across that object and they didn't see it. So there's a lot of difference between looking and seeing, and also listening and hearing. So if you listen to the object, he speaks to you. So it's difficult for me to really put it in words to say, well, this is what happened. But I know that the more I do this stuff, the more I know that something beyond me being an artist is happening. There's some kind of level, things are happening there, some kind of spirituality that happens. So, and I think, for want of words, I could describe it and say, look, let me give the credit to the object. Because some of them, people recognize it. And when they come and say, well, why are you asking for so much? Is it not just a key? Yes, it's just a key, but then you do it. But the key will not stay. So it has memories, and I bring those memories into my work. And I sometimes tend to think that, in terms of dating work, that my work would definitely give a lot of problems to conservators who want to date the work, because each of these objects, they come with different dates. So what is the date of my work? If you want to use carbon dating facility to find the age of the work. Some of the objects I use date back years, and some are fresh materials.
We won't date them that way.
Okay.
We have a new technology for dating, and we call it the TL dating method. The last time a monumental heat touched that material to give it a new form. So the keys may come from the 20th century or 17th century, but you acted on it. That action definitely would tell us this was when Olu used fire to bring this thing together. I'm sure.
I think that's why it is very, very interesting to have Frank to talk about this, because he'll bring his art historian background and it's sure into it. That makes it more interesting. I never came to this podium with a view that I think I have answers to all the questions he's going to throw at me, because I know some of the questions he's going to bring to me, he already have the answers, so I will always count on him to respond.
Yes, we are continuing on where we've been. Artists usually don't discard style, pattern, predilection, or even a like for a very long time. If you start with one motif, trying and testing, you find yourself continuing on that trajectory in so many other work you're going to execute, and those are the things that give you your identity and style. I noticed that arising from the previous one we had shown here, that you had progressed to the sunflower, and then the sunflower arose from what we know as the Capsule Series. Please, we would appreciate your further discussion and enlightenment in terms of the forms and the obsession that the Capsule Series now hold for you.
Well, the Capsule Series, every time I try to embark on new thing, it's whether I'm using new technology, but the tradition of the old still stays. With the Capsule Series, I'm using molds, a mold to create pieces. So the mold is like a dome, and you arrange your piece in the mold, and then, the dome, and then you weld there, and then you bring it out, because that's how traditional casting normally takes place. Now, with casting, you either pour the metal or you press the fluid into it and then it gets hardened. But so borrowing from that tradition of casting, I had to use my molds, it's like multiple molds. So if you have a mold, the essence of a mold or casting is to be able to produce several pieces from one design. And in this case, because of the agitation of the different objects that I use, wanting to be part of that period, it was a lot easier for me to take the mold and continue to try my hands on the different objects that want to be part of that configuration. And so I've tried the spoons, I've tried the nails, I've tried the scissors. This one was scissors. But all these ones are also in reaction to what one experienced in my travels. There was a time if you travel and you mistakenly put your manicure scissors in your luggage, goodbye to it. If you have knife, goodbye to it. So my question has been, where all these scissors is that there? Because people continue to forget. When you're packing your luggage, you always forget. I think now we've gotten to a point where you don't even use the scissors anymore, so you don't even make the mistake, because each time it gets to the airport, the first thing they take is the scissors. So here was just asking questions, and of course, looking at the flight pattern of aircraft, I tried to use the scissors to depict like the flights, aircraft in the sky. And so that also gives that. Well, in the other side, which is the task collector, I started a series of Global Family with Spoons in 2003. Again, looking at object and what does object says to you. Each spoon that you have in your home must have been used by almost everybody in your home and your visitors that comes. Now imagine if the spoons have some kind of chips inside. You should be able to document all the conversations that takes place during your dinner, So these are the things that comes to my head when I'm using some of those things. But this one is about Lagos, because Lagos, there was so many police. Lagos is heavily policed. And every stop, people want to take money from you, extort money from you, and then end up in the buka in the evening drinking pepper soup. So that was what comes into my, so that's why I call it task collector. So again, I play with word, I play with forms. When I maintain the forms, I would want to bring a title that has nothing to do with it, And so these were the things. And as long as you continue to try to look at social issues, economic issues, and using objects as a tool to navigate this, both the horizontal and the vertical class, you will always continue to reinvent yourself. And I think one artist that I respect, I think it's Ablatic Globe, I say it's criminal for an artist to do one piece and stop there. You should be able to have studies. And these studies, again, it's an ongoing debate, dialogue with my objects. They always they witness the nail on the dome, in the studio. And as you start working, you feel, okay, let me try the spoon, and it works. And then you want to try something else. So I don't even know where, because I thought it would be just 2 or 3, but I think we are almost on close to maybe about 50 versions of that, and the journey still continues.
Yes, within this framework equally, that's the Capsule Series, I find you a product designer beyond being a sculptor. And this is a very good example of product design, adorning the house. I've seen some of your work of this nature, you know, as lampshades and all of that. How fitting is it to call you a product designer?
Well, name calling is for you. Well, I will do what I do, and you know, some of them really, again, the objects. I continue to say it now. I think I'm not. I could say my creation. I could take all the credit, but I know deep down inside me that the objects play a vital role in what we want to do. But in some of these pieces, I'm also trying to push the boundaries and see how you know, sculpture can respond to certain corners. The last piece there, you can see that the capsule collapsed. You know, I was trying to look at how you deal with the two planes and then bend it, you know. So just to change it, the element of surprise, you know, comes. It's like the Salvador melting clock, you know. That's one of the things I'm trying to do. So somehow I borrow from artistry, sometimes, you know, I borrow from technology. So, but once the object can assume that shape, you take, you know, you just try your hands.
I equally find your work, oh boy, exciting at the arena of what I call assemblage in the round. Beyond metal, you've explored wood. You've used unconventional means and methods to fuse them or bring them together. I particularly like this work, and I'm sure the audience too do like the repose, especially of the one on my right or left, yes, the one directly behind me. Can you talk to us about it? It makes a whole lot of sense in dialogue.
Yes, this piece is in reaction to Wole Soyinka's Death and the King's Horseman. And in this body of work that I produced, I was trying to interpret the play, but using objects as a character in the play itself. You know, I take a character and see how the objects, you know, respond. And then the second strategy is to reverse the role of theater. You know, in theater situation, the actors are mobile and the audience are static, just like we are. So in this case, the actors are static and the audience is mobile. So this is a conversation between Olunde and Mrs. Pilkin. Mrs. Pilkin is the wife of the district officer, you know, in the play. And I use objects. You know, in this object, you see there's a pendant or necklace there was made out of some gas canister, you know, and that to me is a metaphor for oil. And in this case, you know, if you follow the play, it's about occupation, the British occupation. And I tend to argue that if the British knew very well that we had plenty of oil, perhaps they would not have let go when they let us go on independence. So I was using this again to talk about that. And if you also, although this picture does not say much, there's also some other books, you know, in the sleeve of Olunde, because Olunde had gone out to study medicine, and when the father refused to die, he came back to, you know, be the next king, you know, the king's horseman. So this conversation was going on. I thought it was, you know, of course, again, you see that Olunde in this composition is slightly smaller than the woman. That shows a hierarchy of conversation because the British tend to still look down on us. But Olunde also had his hand closed and his leg closed because in a position where he's not submissive, you know, because he's close to himself. So these are all compositional elements that I bring into this piece itself, but it's reacting to the play. So, and then the one on the right, that's the election all by itself, the big one. And then there are some other small pieces there, because it's an assemblage of 49 pieces on the play itself. You know, that's my master's thesis. So this is all wood construction. Again, when you go to places, the things they give to you, but of course I use wood because, you know, Election Oba is the natural, it's nature. It's very, is the one who's supposed to die and is the one who is in Africa. So the wood itself fit into that narrative. And that's why you still have the wood because he's going to be the next, when the man dies, he's going to be the one to take over his position.
A lot more on the assemblages of Olu Amoda. You can see them, welded metal assembled, and equally metal or wood?
No, this is wood.
Yes, wood.
This is in original wood, and I think it has gone through another phase because I did this in Berlin during the workshop, and I was invited primarily because I could weld. But on getting to the workshop, it's a wooden floor, and so welding is not possible. So what I had to do was to go into the dumpsters and look for wood. And in Berlin, if you cut through some of the wood, you find that they are fresh, and some of the wood date back to the 40s, which brings the question of dealing about how the craftsmen of those days work. So I was enjoying that moment, so I created this piece. And this piece was to travel from Berlin to Dakar, all the West African countries, and then to Cameroon before getting to Lagos. By the time it got to Lagos, some of the woods are already falling off, so it was expedient for me to convert it to bronze. And I'm happy to say one of the collectors of the bronze version is in the audience today, and that's, so now you know the true story of Catherine. But Catherine was a minder in the workshop, We have people who, adults, we have to submit our passport to Catherine, and Catherine was about 18 years old and was being a chaperone for people over 40s. And so every day she gave us stipends to go buy things. And for her to fill that role as the minder, she had to elevate herself. She had to smoke, so you didn't say that as a cigarette, so she smokes and crossed her legs and with her coffee looking at us working, and it was very much like, we are in the concentration camp, and I feel, other people were enjoying it, but I felt, yes, I like the fact that I'm there, but I don't like the fact that I have to be teleguided. So, and I said, look, I'm not going to do it. They said we have to do something on slavery. So I asked the question. The French artists in the group were very happy with slavery. And I asked, what slavery are we talking about? Is it the modern slavery or the old slavery? I said, for the old one, our forefathers had no plan. They came to their villages. They just take them out. They are not anything, villages, rivals would come and move things. And then, but the modern slavery, which we all are, we are slaves to MasterCard, Visa card, and I think to me that is what I want to talk about, So again, in being a nonconformist, it brings me to this place. And of course, if they buy your ticket, you have to work, you have to do something, and I felt I have to enjoy what I'm doing. And when I found this one, it started a new series of work mode for me, so that's where this comes about. And for the other one, again, talks about the Niger Delta. These are funnels. Every now and then you find that the pump price of petrol is subject to the crisis in the Niger Delta worldwide. But the people in Niger Delta are so eager to receive the government officials when they come visiting. They dress up, they line the streets, and they dance, but their plates are empty. So you can see they look elegant, but their bowl is empty. So that was what I was talking about in this piece itself. And again, looking at objects. Again, the funnel itself is a classical. If it's reversed, it's a, fantastic flowing gown. So all I need to do is just put the head. So 75% of this was done by the object itself, and 25% is that. So that's why I keep saying that the object takes more role than me. But of course, I take responsibility for the...
You see, what Olu has told us is a little bit short of what we're expecting from the truth around him. This is a typical Ichekiri Urobo skirt dress. that dominates what we call resource control in the Niger Delta, except that the resource control handkerchief that normally adorns the pocket is missing here, you know. But Olu, definitely, from what we've heard so far, is a sensitive artist to the social realities and sensitivities of his own time. He talks to us. The militants are not here, but he is speaking on their behalf. And I do hope that the kind of soldiers that invaded Kalakuta are no longer there. You can only find them in Baramatu, close to his home. The truth is this, that some time ago, so many years ago, when Pablo Picasso created Guernica, the Spaniards who came in, I mean, the Germans who came to him during the Second World War said, "You painted Guernica." He said, "No, I didn't paint it. You created it, and I painted it." Yes. So we create social contexts oftentimes, and he sees them in the forms, and the forms now speak to him. I now realize how the forms speak to him in terms of how he manipulates them for work. And so we are here with what I call the metal, pure metal relations or relatives of the wooden assemblages.
Can I just interject for a second? So if you have questions, we're going to have our attendees giving out pieces of paper. So please write your question down, and we will pick it up momentarily. Thank you so much.
Yes. There are before you some metals.
Okay. So what am I supposed
Metal assemblage.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm interested so much in this other one. I know you've exhausted this in an exhibition some time ago, but you still can talk about them. But those your strokes, the vibrant strokes in your sketches are very, very strong here.
Well, there was a period where I'm so drawn into the horse series itself from my project to this date, you know. So, and engines are measured by the horsepowers, you know, and I use that as a metaphor because every bolt or something that you find in automobile fits, you know,
speaks to horsepower.
Yeah, speaks to horsepower, so you can use that. So I just use that as a metaphor. But in this case, this was more responding to the Mycenaean crisis in the north, where, you know, you have people on the horsebacks and spears, and you know, fighting people with armored tanks. You know, so I again looking at that war. And that period, this is the same period we did this, and it was a lot easier for me to do that. But of course, at the same time, the galloping horses and the pose itself, which of course is a delight for any sculptor to, when you're working in Christian sculptures, you like to see that because metal allows you to take those snapshots of the movement and freeze it at that point. And I just enjoyed it, you know, so it's, almost everything there is from the car. Nothing, you know, the wheels, the rods are there, but the hooves of the horses, they're all from the car itself. So it's almost a complete breakdown of a car and then come back into it. And then looking at mobility of cars and looking at horses, these are all looking at transport from one period to the other. And so again, without talking about ancient and present, you know, they live side by side. So it's contemporaneous is not so much about modernity. It's about how you position, you know, ancient and use them, you know, in the new context. And in this case, what I was doing is looking at movements, you know, and looking at actions, and all these things fit into that. So whether horse as ancient movement of moving things or movement or for cars now, it's natural. And if you look even the modern day cars, they're all about plants, about cars, about, you know, I mean, horses or animals. So people look at nature, and this is, we are all connected. So I am not too sensitive about what is ancient and what is contemporary, what is modern, but I think I live in modern time. So I would respond to those things.
Well, Olu, I'm inclined to call you or label you a trailblazer. You may agree or don't agree, but for one, I think that you've given discards an otherworldly frame and phenomenon as an artist. Agreed or not?
I will not take the trailblazer, but I'll take the blaze. The trail is there, but the blaze, no, I won't. Well, honestly speaking, I will take it as a compliment, but I don't feel so. I think for every movement, everything you do here, there are a lot of people working out there. And truly, they said if you exhibit, you exit. There are a lot of artists who are doing some amazing stuff out there, and they are not exhibiting, so they don't exist. But I think I will take it as a compliment.
I thank you for that, but just another question, because you've talked about yourself. We talked about youths who don't know how much it had taken you to pay your dues and the long way you've come to this prominence as a sculptor talked about. What do you have to tell those who've been looking at Olu from a distance, those who are meeting him for the first time, and all of that, who aspire to wear your kind of coat now as artists,
well,
and an artist who has made it? He says he's not a trailblazer.
If you believe me, then come with me. But I tell you, I struggle every day, and the struggle continues. It's not an easy track to travel, but I think I enjoy every moment I spend in the studio and work. So I don't know what to tell you other than the fact that enjoy what you're doing, and you'll find your voice, because it's a cluster of noises out there. If you're in a musical band, you find that you play the drum, you play, the guitar, you play all these things. They all come together as one whole. And no matter how loud the drummer is, he wants to hear that drum in order to connect. And so we are all one big web, and you have to find your voice in that. And even if you're the beginner, there's nothing like beginner. It is almost like you grow, you mature in yourself. And being yourself is more important. I think we've listened to Gary, who talks about saying, well, look, find his own voices through some other persons makes him a better person. Sometimes you can find your voice through the other people. And I didn't come to the realization of being a sculptor just because I want to be. First, I rebelled against being a graphic artist, and then I find the freedom in that. But most importantly, somebody somewhere in my school just saw me one of my basic design projects and said, well, look, if for any reason you want to specialize in sculpture, I think you should move towards constructivism. And it was a drawing professor that told him, later Omosage. And if you are in his class, everybody wants to run to his class. He's a man who doesn't respect timetable. He goes to the class, and if a junior class is having the drawing, he sacks that class where the most important people want to draw. So he brings sculptors and painters. I said, these are the most important people. So you all get out. And you're so respected. So everybody wants to be in that class. And so for such a man to come to you and say, well, look, move in this direction. Man, I had to go back to my book. I said, well, what is about constructivism? And truth about it is that I think because I'm a lazy artist, I find constructivism, I find it very, very, interesting in the sense that, look, there's no guessing. You weld something and you see it there. It's not like doing something in clay, put it in the mold, and then you start pouring your mold, your molten metal. You don't know what is going to come out. No, this one I know. So this is like photocopy. So I see that it's the laziest part of art.
Freshness of finish.
So that's the feeling I have about,
Olu, you talk passion. Listening to you tells me that you're very passionate about what you do and what you've been doing, and that is what has sustained you. You stated something now that takes me back to what we call if you love what you do, you wouldn't work for one day. So Olu's not been working. Olu's been enjoying himself.
Yes.
So let's put it this way. What is your relationship with your patrons, clients, and audience? That's where we close it.
Okay. First, my audience, I think I have a very small audience, and they enjoy me, and they like to meet with me. But patronage, I think if I have the permission to call somebody in the crowd to help me, I mean, this is now going into collecting, and I don't think as an artist it's morally right for me to start talking about patronage, because I will be selling myself. This is not, I have a product, and the people who buy it. Maybe I want to call somebody who has been collecting to say, what's your relationship with the artist? So I think during the question and answer, perhaps he may be able to come into that.
So we are up for question time. I'm sure we talked about church today. The anointing from Olu didn't flow so close to you. That's why I didn't hear the resounding applause. Please. Yes. One question comes here from the Facebook. Which interests you more, the object you produce or the physical evolution in the scraps you assemble?
First, I want to thank whoever asked that question, because it's very spot on. There's no distinction between the two, because they move simultaneously. And like I said, when you start getting into the groove of producing using repurposed object, the first thing you have to lose sight of is yourself, because you're going to get into this, swim in this web of objects. And because the objects continue to come from different directions, it's like in those days when you have the screensaver in the computer, you see the things just keep flying like that, I think I enjoy both, I enjoy, but I like to see how this, the magical moment of unlike objects coming together, like plastic, steel, all coming together. I like that aspect, but beyond that, there's a stack of objects like fossil in my studio waiting to be used. And so it would be unfair, I think I like the evolution, that aspect of it, because truly that's what happens in all this, the evolution itself. But it's not different from the product itself, because again, like I said, when you finish one, somebody sees computer parts and say, well, look, my board has just broken. Can I send it to you? That's another thing. That's another evolution itself. So I've been involved in, I think the only thing that keeps me going is the ability to evolve. And evolution is not doing the same thing. It's not even trying new things, but being there when the dock is open, to you to take advantage of that. And I think with the more objects I get and the more things I continue to do, it makes it easy for me to evolve. And, there's no end to that. So the joy of evolution to me is more than even the product, because they are part of it.
So you're telling us that putting your hand on the plow is it? Because any other thing that comes with your hand on the plow, you know how to place it where.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another question says, I see in your practice a vision where you're able to fill space, be it with chairs, gates, wall hangings, window covers, to sculptures. What is an unrealized project? The person asks.
Unrealized
project
is inside me, because everything you find out there is about 75% of my intent. There's a whole lot of 25 stuck somewhere that's either lost through translation, lost through inability to use technology to realize those things. These are the unfinished projects.
But how about what we call qualitative leap? You put a line here, and it changes your orientation from what dream you ever had before. Does it occur? It does.
It does.
With me and as an artist.
No, it does. It does. But again, it's not with a view of regret. It's a view of taking not even the chance, taking advantage of the chance. Because if you're working with repurposed objects, there's the element of chance that comes with it, and you must be prepared to take that chance. I work with 2 assistants. One is an apprentice who is just learning, and then the other one is a deaf and dumb. Okay, so what did they teach me? I have to teach that one to respond to things. He takes all the shouting. That's if I need to yell at somebody, is the one who could hear. The one who cannot hear shrugs his shoulders. But he understands me. And so he does his own interpretation. So even if I say this is where we're going and he goes that direction, what do? So the first thing you have to eliminate, failure is not, error is not. Let's move on, And truly, this is a constant, evolution that takes place in my studio on a daily basis.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes.